Hello students, welcome to this another video in the series where I'll be taking the previous year physics solutions of the NEET paper. Today I'm going to discuss the NEET 2013 physics paper solution. Remember, NEET 2013 was the first time the NEET exam was conducted in India, and that was very special to me also because that was the first batch I took for the NEET. Previous to that, from 2008 to 12, I was only teaching the engineering students, or you can say for IIT JEE. In 2012, we started in our institute the medical division, and this was the first batch. And this first batch initially was not taught by me. I was given the charge, you can say, after September, and from September till exam onwards, I took the responsibility of preparing these students for the NEET examination. That was the first experience for me regarding this medical exam, because I was not aware of that, because you are not teaching specifically the medical students before that. So that year was very important for me as a teacher also. I studied the previous year papers very rigorously regarding the AIPMT and the PMT examinations that used to take place, and I prepared lots of test papers to let the students practice, because that was our first year, so it was onus on me that they score very well. And by the God's grace, the results were very good. You can see on the picture, that was the first year result. The students were not very large, but then also the result was very good, and we got students selected into very good medical colleges. Now coming to the paper. The paper was held on 5th of May 2013, and as you can see on the analysis sheet that's coming up, there were 23 questions I classify as easy, 6 were tough and rest were medium. And if I take the easy ones and half of the medium ones, approximately 130 should be the score every student who was good enough in physics should be getting, and those who are very good should get 150 plus in that particular paper. Though at that time the NEET was not as high scoring as it is in now recent years, you can say. In 2013, to give you an idea, the first ranker scored 691 marks, and 10,000 rank was approximately at 450 marks. So the students scoring 450, 460 were able to sneak into good MBBS colleges even in the state of Rajasthan at that time, which now is impossible for a unreserved or the open category student to get an MBBS seat in the present scenario. So let's see what was in that paper.
हेलो, मेरा नाम अनिरुद्ध एरन है। मैंने नीट यूजी 2013 एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम क्लियर किया था and I got an all India rank of 2500. I did my MBBS from JLN Medical College, Ajmer, and right now I'm doing my MD in respiratory medicine from SMS Medical College, Jaipur. जैसे कि हमें मालूम है कि इस साल नीट यूजी का एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम काफ़ी डिले हो गया है, and now it is due on 13th of September. So बच्चों को काफ़ी वक्त मिल गया है रिवीजन के लिए। हमें पता है कि पेपर के टोटल मार्क्स में से आधा वेटेज बायो का होता है, तो बायो को हमें अच्छे से रिवाइज करने की ज़रूरत है। एंड लास्ट मंथ के अंदर हमारा यही गोल रहना चाहिए कि हम लोग कुछ भी नया नहीं पढ़ें। जो हम लोगों ने पूरे साल भर पढ़ा है, हम लोग बस उसी को बार बार रिवाइज करें, क्योंकि कुछ भी नया पढ़ने से वो चीज़ हमें रिटेन नहीं रहती है। आपने जो भी साल भर पढ़ा है, आपके जो नोट्स हैं, उन पे भरोसा रखें और उसी को बार बार रिवाइज करें। ऑल द बेस्ट फॉर योर एग्जाम्स।
So let's start with the first question. In an experiment, 4 quantities A, B, C and D are measured with percentage error of 1, 2, 3 and 4% respectively. The quantity P is calculated as A cube B square by CD. The percentage error in B is. So this first question was a basic question on your error analysis. So because it is given like this, we directly can say the fractional error or the percentage error in P is thrice the fractional error in A plus twice the fractional error in B plus the fractional error in C multiplied by 1 plus the fractional error in D. So this delta A by A is given as 1%, delta B by B is 2%, this is 3%, this is 4%. So if you add it up, this is 3%, this is 4%, this is 4 plus 3 is 7, 7 and 4 you had 11, 11 and 3 you have 14%. So it's a straightforward question of your error analysis, which I expect you should do it. Next, the velocity of projectile at the initial point A is 2i plus 3j. So this is ux, this is uy I can assume. its velocity at point B is at the same height. So first of all, you know ux remains same, that is 2i, and at this point it is at the same height, so uy component will be same, but instead of upward it is downward, so it would be 2i minus 3j. So again, this was a very easy question from projectile. Next, a stone is falling freely under gravity. It covered distances h1, h2, h3 in the first 5, next 5 and next 5 seconds respectively. The relation between h1, h2 and h3 is, this is a standard result you remember. Let me derive it again. Let's say you drop it. Let's say in the first 5 seconds it fall by this distance h1. So this is from t equal to 0 to t equal to 5. So first of all, what you will write that this let's say downward direction is positive y, displacement is h1 is u is 0, ut is 0 plus half g into 5 square. Similarly, for the 10th second, let's say it falls up to here. Let's say it falls up to here, and let's say this is additional h2 in the next 5. So the total in 10 seconds would be h1 plus h2, that would be equal to half g into 10 whole square. And similarly, let's say here it comes at 15 seconds, and let's say the additional distance is h3 in next 5. So h1 plus h2 plus h3 comes out as half g into 15 square. So if you do this, you have this ratio h1 is to h1 plus h2 is to h1 plus h2 plus h3. This ratio will come out as 5 square, 10 square, 15 square, that would be 1 square, 2 square, 3 square, that is 1 is to 4 is to 9. And if you solve it from here, h1 is to h2 is to h3, that will come out as 1 square is to 2 square minus 1 square is to 3 square minus 2 square, that comes out as 1 is to 3 is to 5. That most of you actually remember this. So h1, you can say h2 is thrice of h1 and h3 is 5 times of h1. So the option 2 is the most appropriate that you can tick here. Next, so that one also not difficult. You have 3 blocks M, 2M, 3M connected by a string as shown. After an upward force F is applied on the block M, okay, masses goes upward with constant speed v. What is the net force on the block of mass 2m? Because they are going at constant speed, that simply means here constant velocity, that means acceleration is 0, and if acceleration is 0, the Newton's second law says net force on the body will be 0. So on any of the block, net force is going to be 0. Again, a very straightforward question. Next, the upper half of an inclined plane of inclination theta is perfectly smooth while lower is rough. Block starts from rest at the top, will again come to rest at the bottom if the coefficient of friction between the block and lower half is given by. Again, it's a very standard result that you might have been taught now. So take it like this. This is an incline. Let's say first half is smooth and the second half is, let's say, rough. So what we can say, it starts from here, let's say from rest, and ends here at rest. So it is A, let's say B and C. Here the speed is 0. Here the final velocity is 0. Let's say here the speed would be what we can say VB. So what I can say directly from A to C, if I see the block, I use simply work energy theorem. I know W net would be equal to delta K, and that is 0 from A to C. Now by the time mg is acting like this, so work done by mg, because it is going down, the work done by mg will be positive. That would be mg sin theta component working for, let's say, this total distance, let's say call it 2s. So this half would be s, this half would be s. So mg sin theta into 2s. And the friction only acts from B to C, and friction during B to C, you know, will be acting upwards like this, and Fk. So that would be minus Fk into S, that should be 0. So mg sin theta, 2mg sin theta, S and S will cancel, equals to Fk. Fk you know is mu k, and here you directly know is mg cos theta. So what we have here, the value of mu k has to be equals to twice of tan theta. So option 3 is the answer here. You can also do by applying the third equation of motion between A and B and then between B and C, but this is a far better method, I suppose, to adopt. A uniform force of 3 I cap plus j cap Newton acts on a particle of 2 kg. The particle is displaced from this position to this position. Be clear, this is I plus k, this is I plus j minus k types. Work done by the force. Because force is constant, I can directly write work done is F dot S. S is displacement, which is R final minus R initial, that is 4i plus 3j minus k cap minus 2i cap plus k cap. So what you are left with, this is 2i cap plus 3j cap minus 2k cap. So the work done would be Fx delta x, that is 3 into 2 plus 1 into 3. There is no component in z, so that would be 0. So that is 6 plus 3 will go for 9 joules. The work done by the force is going to be 9 joules, option 1. Next, now an explosion breaks a rock into 3 parts in a horizontal plane. 2 of them go off at right angles. First one 1 kg has 12 speed, the second of 2 kg has 8 meter per second speed. If the third part flies off with 4 meter per second, speed, then its mass is going to be. So because they go in the perpendicular direction, let's say first one goes along x and let's say second one goes along y, definitely third one will go somewhere here because the total momentum has to be 0. So what I can write, P1 plus P2 plus P3 sort will be 0. So going by the analogy that I have taken, let's say first one is 1 into 12, that would be 12 I cap. Second would be 2 into 18, that is 16 j cap, that is equal to P3. P3 would be M3 into 4, or let's say just write it P3 only, we'll make it up. So that is P3 equals to 0. So what is P3? P3 comes out as minus 12i minus 16j. So that V3, if we can do it, is minus 12i minus 16j divided by mass of 3. And the magnitude of V3 now would be root of 12 square plus 16 square upon M3, and that is given as 4. So what we can write, 12 square plus 16 square, you do that, you know, is 144 plus 256, that is 400. So that would be 20. So 20 upon M3 is 4, so it leaves you with M3 equals to 5 kg. So the mass of the third one will be 5 kg. You can directly go for. Next. Now what you have, a rod PQ having a mass M, length L, is hinged at point P. The rod is kept horizontal by a massless string tied to point Q as shown in figure. Okay. When string is cut, the initial angular acceleration of the rod is. Okay. So it is kept horizontal by a massless string tied to point Q when the string is cut. So as the string is cut, what we will see, the angular acceleration we have to find of the rod. So first of all, what we will see, this mg will act at the center of mass. So what we can do, we can directly say the tau is equal to I alpha. So let's say it is hinged about P, so the torque would be mg, this gap you can make it out as L by 2, and the sense would be like this. So mg into L by 2, that is equal to I alpha. I about the end you all know is ml square by 3. So that is ml square by 3 times alpha. So the alpha comes out as 3g by 2l, and in this sense in the photo, so we'll go for option 1 here. Next. You have a small object of uniform density rolling up a curved surface with initial velocity v. It reaches a height of 3v square by 4g with respect to the initial position, then height is. So because it is rolling up, so we'll assume it is perfectly rolling. So what would be the loss in kinetic energy would be half mv square beta. Beta, you know, the factor we use as 1 plus k square by r square, and that should be equal to mgh, and h is given as 3v square by 4g. Loss in kinetic is gain in potential, because at highest point we'll assume both the linear and angular speed will become 0. So this m goes, v square goes. So this g and g also goes. This beta comes out as 3 by 2 and beta is 3 by 2 for the disk, you know. So we'll go for option 4, that is disk. Beta is 3 by 2 for disk. So disk is going to be the answer. Next. You have a body of mass m taken from the earth's surface to the height equal to twice the radius. The change in potential energy is. So what you write, delta u is u final minus u initial. Because the distances are of the order of the radius, we cannot write mgh. We'll write the complete expression minus gme, mass of object, upon height equal to twice the radius. So from center it would be 3r, and minus minus will become plus. When it was at surface, it was at a gap r, so we can write it as gmm by r. Okay, so what you are left with, gme m by r, take it as common, it is 1 minus 1 by 3, that is 2 by 3. gme m by r, multiply and divide by r and r. So this gme by r square is g at the surface, you write, that is 2 by 3 mg surface into r. You can go for option 2 in this particular case. This is 2 by 3 mass into g at surface into r, you can write. Next. Infinite number of bodies, each of 2 kg, are situated on x-axis at distance 1, 2, 4, 8 respectively from the origin. The potential due to this system at the origin will be, so what I can write, potential at origin due to the first one would be minus gm into 1, due to second is minus gm into 2, due to third is minus gm by 4, and so on. So what you are left with, take minus gm as common, it is 1 plus 1 by 2 plus 1 by 4. This is an infinite gp, and you know its value is a upon 1 minus that difference. So 1 upon 1 minus 1 by 2 is the factor. So what you are left with, this is a 2 minus 1, so it would be 2. So minus 2 gm you can go for, and mass is 2 kg, so it becomes minus 4g as per the numerical values. So go for option 4 here. Next. The following 4 wires are made of the same material. Which of these will have the largest extension when the same tension is applied? So you know the extension delta L is FL upon AY. When the same tension, that means force is same, and same material means y is same, so delta L is going to be proportional to L by A, or you can say L by D square in that case, because area is proportional to D square. So L should be maximum, D should be minimum. So this is L maximum but not D minimum, so we have to check it first. So for the first one we will have the ratio as 50 upon unit will be same 0.5 square, second one will have 100 upon 1 square, third one will have 200 upon 2 square, and this is 300 upon 3 square. So if I take it 50 upon 0.5 square, that will be giving me what I can say 50 into 4, that is 200, this is 100, this is 200 by 4, that is 50, that is 300 by 9. Definitely this one is the maximum, so the first one will give the maximum extension in this particular case. You can go for next. The wettability of a surface by liquid depends primarily on, the wettability is decided by angle of contact, and that angle of contact will give you whether it is going to, let's say, be like the water on the glass or the mercury on the glass type thing. So it is the angle of contact. That's a theoretical question you need to remember. Next, the molar specific heat of an ideal gas at constant pressure volume are CpCv. If gamma is Cp by Cv and R is the universal constant, Cv is this, it is the easiest one. You all know Cv is R upon gamma minus 1, Cp is gamma R upon gamma minus 1. So again an easy one for you. Piece of iron is heated in a flame. It first becomes dull red, then reddish yellow, and finally turns to white hot. This explanation is explained by Wien's law. As the temperature of the body increases, the wavelength corresponding to maximum radiation keeps on shifting to the lower one. So initially it was red and it shifts towards the bluer region, and finally when all 7 are emitted in the equal amounts, it turns white hot. So white hot object is at more temperature as compared to reddish yellow as compared to dull red. So it is based on the Wien's displacement law that you know. A gas is taken through a cycle A to B to C to A. As shown, what is the net work done by the gas? So it is a PV curve, standard curve. So that net work done would be area, and if you see is the cycle is clockwise, so it would be positive. So W is positive and area half. This gap is what you have 228, that is 6 into 10 to the power minus 3, and this is what you have 6 into 4 into 10 to the power 5. So what you are left with, this is 6 4s are 24 by 2 12, and this would be 100. So 1200 joule positive. We can go for, let me check if I have done a mistake. Yes, I have done a mistake. So what is my mistake? This is 2 to 7, so be careful. This is 2 to 7, so this is 5. So that was my mistake. So now I was lucky that there was no option like that. So it would be 20 by 2, that is 1000 joule. That is going to be the answer. So second one is going to be the correct one. Be careful. Next. During an adiabatic process, the pressure of a gas is found to be proportional to the cube of its temperature. Again, that is what I had told you for the polytropic process, and here it is adiabatic, it is not polyprotic. So pressure is proportional to the cube of temperature. So I can write temperature is proportional to PV. So because the moles and R are constant, so what we get from here, P square V cube is constant, or what we can write, PV to the power 3 by 2 is constant, and comparing it, this becomes gamma. Gamma is Cp by Cv. So go for option 4, 3 by 2. Next, in the given volume temperature diagram, what is the relation between P1 and P2? I think these all questions you have attempted in NTA Abhyas test also, because they have taken questions from here only. So what we write, V is, I can write as NR upon P into T. So V and T is a straight line and slope is inverse to P. So lesser slope means more pressure. So lesser slopes mean more pressure. That means P1 is going to be greater than P2. So I'll go for option 3 in this case. Next, the amount of heat energy required to raise the temperature of a gram of helium at NTP from T1 to T2. A gram of helium, that means moles, is equal to 1 by 4 from T1 to T2. So heat energy at NTP, that means from T1 to T2, what is the amount of energy that you would be needing here? So you can directly write, that is Q would be equal to, let's say, delta U. I am assuming it is kept at a constant volume. I am taking it, and I am taking it because I am seeing all the factors 3 by 2 types, not 5 by 2 types, so that you can make it out. So this is NCV delta T, that is 1 by 4. CV is 3R by 2, and delta T is T2 minus T1. So what you have now, this is you can write as 3R by 8 T2 minus T1, and R is you can write as Na into K, because R by Na is K, so that is one and the same thing. So which option is correct? The first option is coming out as the correct one, that you can directly write. Okay, next, a wave traveling in the positive x direction having displacement along y direction as 1 meter, okay, wavelength 2 pi, frequency this is represented by. So frequency is 1 by pi, so what we write omega t. So that what omega you write as 2 pi f, that is 2 pi into 1 by pi, so omega is 2, so coefficient of t would be 2. So these all are rejected, so you are left with only one option, but let me check other things also. Displacement 1, that is okay, and wavelength, so k would be 2 pi by lambda, so 2 pi by 2 pi, that is equal to 1, so x coefficient would be 1. So first option is the most appropriate one, that is the only appropriate one. If we study the vibration of a pipe open at both ends, then the following statement is not true. Open end will be antinode, odd harmonics of fundamental will be generated, all harmonics will be generated, pressure change will be maximum. So in open pipe all harmonics are generated, we know. Odd harmonics only will be generated, so odd harmonics are definitely going to generated, and all are also going to be generated. Pressure change will be maximum at both ends. So pressure change is going to be maximum at both ends is wrong, because the open end is displacement antinode. They are displacement antinode, but they are pressure nodes. So just remember, so open end would be a pressure node, so it won't be maximum, it would be minimum the pressure change. So fourth one is definitely going to be wrong in this particular case. Okay, so open end will be antinode. This was also misleading one, because it will be antinode in terms of displacement, so we can treat it as right. So the most appropriate not true one would be the fourth option here. Next, you have a source of unknown frequency giving 4 beats per second when sounded with a source of known frequency 250. So 4 with 250, that means either it is 254 or either it is 246 for sure. Now, second harmonic of the source of unknown frequency gives 5 beats per second when sounded with a source of frequency 513. Okay, so double of this gives 5 with this. So 513 double means it is either 518 or it is 508. So if I double it, this doubling 254 into 2 will give me 408, and if I double it, it will give me, this will give me 492. So the only matching option, sorry, 508, I am wrong here. So only matching option is 254 that I am getting. So I'll go for option first here. Just looking at the two data, I can make it out, it would be 254 hertz. Next, now this one was the pick of the question. You have two pith balls carrying equal charges are suspended from a common point by a string of equal length. The equilibrium separation between them is r. Now the string is rigidly clamped at half the height. The equilibrium separation between the balls will now become. So what would be the equilibrium separation between them? So this is a very nice question that is being asked. So it is clamped at half the height, it is being given. So first of all, how first generalize this. Let this angle be theta. Draw the FBD of any ball. This would be T, this would be mg, and there would be that repulsive Coulombic force Fc. So what I can make for equilibrium, what I can write, T cos theta is vertical, that balances mg. T sine of theta balances that k, both have same charges, so kq square by r square. So what I can write, tan theta would be kq square upon mg r square, that is what you have written. And what is tan theta from this diagram? This diagram, tan theta comes out as r upon 2 divided by y. So what we have here, so that dependence on y and r, because k, q and mg are fixed, so from here I can directly make out y is proportional to r cube. So in the second case it should be r dash, photo is not clear. So if y is reduced to half, or you can say r is proportional to y ki power 1 by 3. So if y becomes half, r will become r by 2 to the power 1 by 3. Sorry, not r by 2 to the power 1 by 3, r divided by 2 to the power 1 by 3. So that is going to be the answer. So as per this would be option number 2 that is going to be correct. So that was a very nice question. You have to judge just the relationship between y and r here, because rest all things are constant. So this was perhaps the pick of the question of this paper, which was not easy to solve. A, B, C are the 3 points in a uniform electric field. The potential is, as you go in the direction of field, potential decreases. So as you go forward, potential will decrease. So the leftmost point will have highest potential, rightmost will have the least potential. So B is highest, A is minimum. So maximum at A, no, maximum at B, yes. So the correct option is, it is maximum at B. Next, you have a wire of resistance 4 ohms stretched to twice its original length. So whenever you stretch, you assume the formula R is rho L by, you assume volume remains same, so multiply divide by L, you write it as rho L square by V. So in that case R is not proportional to L, it becomes proportional to L square. So that will now double, means it will become 4 times. So it would be 16 ohms in this case. Don't do it as 8 ohms. That is a thing that you must have studied. Next, the internal resistance of a 2.1 volt cell which gives a current of 0.2 amperes through a resistance of 10 ohm is okay. So I you write as E upon R plus R, that is you all know. So it is 0.2 is E, 2.1, and R is 10 plus R. So what you have, you do this 2 plus 0.2 R, या 1 by 5 R you can write, that is 2.1. So 1 by 5 R is 0.1, so R is equal to 0.5 ohms. So it would be option 2 in this particular case, it is half a ohm. Now, the resistance of the 4-arm PQRS in a Wheatstone are 10, 30, 30, 90 respectively. The EMF internal resistance of the cell are 7 and 5 respectively. If the galvanometer resistance is 50 ohm, the current drawn from the cell is. So first of all, if you can see 10 by 30, 30 by 90, it is balanced. So it is going to be balanced bridge. So that galvanometer resistance would be of no use. So if the effective resistance of that Wheatstone part would be, you can say 10, 30, 30, 90. The mid one you can remove, and this is the effective network that you will be having it. So this is 10, this is 30, this is 30, this is 90. So this is 10 and 30, 40, 90 and 30, 120, 120 and 40, that will be 30. You can directly make it out. So 30 plus this internal resistance 5. So I would be, what you can say, 7 volt divided by 35, that is 0.2 ampere. Directly you can go for, so do go for option second, it is 0.2 amperes. Next, when a proton is released from rest in a room, starts with an initial acceleration a0 towards west. Now at rest means this is only the electricity force, that is E times E would be equal to ma0 because it is proton, so the field will also be towards west. So E would be ma0 by E, that is going to be towards west. So what we are left with these two options. Next, the magnetic field. There's two options also, we have to just check the direction in the second part. Let's see. When it is projected towards north with a speed v0, it moves with an initial acceleration 3a0 towards west. So when it has a speed, the acceleration changes a0 to 3a0. That means the force by magnetic field that you write as qvb ev0 into b0 would be equals to m times 2a0. So the value of b0 would be 2m a0 by e. Now it should be, the force must be towards west, that means it is going towards north, let's say, and let's say this is east, this is west. So to have the force towards west, the magnetic field must be pointing inwards. Then v cross b you can have towards west. So it would be, you can say inward, that means downwards. You can write in our context. So it would be, it is towards west and it is towards downward. So it is going to be EV0. I should have write it properly. Yeah. So the option 2 is going to be the correct one. So it's a very good question, checking the directions. Next, a current loop in a magnetic field experiences a torque whether the field is uniform or non-uniform, can be in equilibrium in one orientation, can be in equilibrium in two orientation, both are stable, unstable, sorry, can be in equilibrium in two orientation, one stable while unstable. You know that this is the answer. Two orientation are 0 degree, that you call it stable equilibrium, and theta equal to 180 degree, which you call as unstable equilibrium. So that is a straightforward theoretical one. So you go for option 4 in this particular case. Next, this one was also a nice question. You have a bar magnet of length L, magnetic dipole moment M, bent in the form of an arc as shown in the figure, subtending angle 60 degree at the center. The new magnetic moment is. So here what the logic we will use is M is proportional to that separation. So initially the separation is L, now the separation would be, let me call it L dash. So this is R and R. So what would be L dash? So what I can make it out, let's say if I draw this is a perpendicular bisector. This angle, you know, by symmetry would be 30 degree. So what I can make out, this L dash by 2 would be equal to, if I do, that is equal to R sine 30 degree, that is R by 2. So that because 60 degree and it is also both sides are equal, so it would be 60, 60. It's a equilateral triangle. You can directly have said L dash is equal to R. So L dash has now become R. And what is the relation between R and overall length? The length of arc, you write by from theta is L complete length upon radius, and that theta is 60 means pi by 3 is L by R. So R is equal to 3L by pi. So because the separation has become 3L by pi times 3 by pi times, so that magnetic moment M dash would also be 3M by pi times. It is pi. Let me write it clearly. so it would be 3m by pi. So going by this, I'll go for option 2 in this particular case. Next, your wire loop rotating in a magnetic field, the frequency of change of direction of the induced EMF is, the frequency of change of the direction of induced EMF is. So just draw it like this, because we know it is of that cos or sine style. It would be like this, the EMF would be like this. So if I take any cycle, let's say this is any one cycle of time period t, you will see it will change direction 2 times, one time negative to positive, one time positive to negative. So in a single rotation it changes twice per revolution. Next, a coil of self-inductance cell is connected in series with a bulb B and an AC source. Brightness of the bulb decreases. Okay, so you have bulb of coil of self-inductance is with the bulb, so you have an LR circuit. Okay, now if the frequency of AC source is decreased, XL decreases, so Z will also decrease, because Z is XL square plus R square. So in that case current will increase, so bulb will be more brighter, so it is wrong. Number of turns in the coil is reduced. If you reduce number of turns in the coil, L will decrease, which in turn means XL decreases, again Z decreases, I will again increase, so it is also wrong. Capacitance is included in the same circuit, so it comes into resonance, so again the current will increase, so it is not. So we are left with the last one. Iron rod is inserted, so L will increase, so XL will increase, so Z will increase, so current will decrease, so the brightness will definitely decrease, so go for option 4. Next, the condition under which a microwave oven heats up a food item containing water molecules most efficiently. Now this was a very nice question. This is given in the blue box in your electromagnetic waves chapter of NCERT, last chapter of your 12th part 1. So for the microwave, what we have, the frequency of the microwave must match the resonant frequency of the water molecules, because every food particle has a tinge of water in it, and if you supply that frequency that is equal to the natural frequency of that water, the water molecules receives energy at the fastest rate, and you therefore see it cooking up very fast. So that is the answer, option 1. So for more details, please refer that blue paragraph of that EM waves chapter here. Next, the ratio of longest wavelengths corresponding to Lyman and Balmer's reason. Longest means, for Lyman, longest means 1 upon lambda 1 would be the transition from 2 to 1. So that would be 13.6, 1 upon 1 square minus 1 upon 2 square. That is 13.6 into 3 by 4 I can write. Similarly, 1 by lambda 2, that is going to be for Balmer, it would be 2 to 3, that is 1 by 2 square minus 1 by 3 square. So that would be 13.6 into 5 by 36. So you have to check the ratio of lambda 1 by lambda 2. So I reverse divided. So it will be 5 by 36 upon 3 by 4. So it comes out as 20 upon 36 into 3. So it is 5 and this is 9. So 5 by 27. Go for option 1 in this particular case. This is 5 by 27. Next, the half-life of a radioactive isotope X is 20 years. It decays to another Y which is stable. The two elements were found to be in the ratio 1:7 in a given sample of rock. Now this, when I teach my students, I simply tell them, remember this ratio. If the ratio is 1:1, it means 50% it decays, that means time would be T half. If it is 1:3, that means it is 1/4 of the original, because 3 parts have dissociated, 1 is left, so time would be 2 T half. If it is 1:7, that means it is 1 by 8, so that is 3 T half. It is 1 by 15, it would be 4 T half. Similarly, you can go for, so here, if you remember that it is directly 3 T half, you can directly tick straight away, that is going to be 60 years in this particular case. Next, a certain mass of hydrogen is changed to helium by the process of fusion. The mass defect is this, the energy liberated per U is okay. So certain mass of hydrogen is changed to helium, so approximately 4 U mass is involved in one reaction. So in one reaction the energy released is 0.02866 U into, let's say, 931, and per U, if you have to check, you have to divide it by 4, that then you can have this per U, because this is MeV per U, that will give you the answer. So this goes. So what we are left with, we have to now simplify this. So simply, you know that helium energy was approximately like 26.7. This value would be approximately 26.7. So it would be 26.7 divided by 4. So if you do this, or let's say, let me do it for you. Let's say if I do this, this is 0.007 and it would be then 1 and then would be 26, let's say 16 something. So 9 sevens are, you have that, what you can have, 9 sevens are 63, so it would be 6 point something would be the answer here. So I can directly take 6.675 MeV per U here. That is what we can see here. Next, For photoelectric emission from certain metal, the cutoff frequency is nu. If radiation of 2 nu impinges, the maximum possible velocity will be. So what would be Kmax? Kmax is energy of photon, that is 2h nu minus h nu, that is h nu, that is half m Vmax square. So Vmax comes out as root 2 h nu by m. Again, not a tough one for you. You can make it out. Option 3 is appropriate. Next, the wavelength of an electron and lambda p of a photon of same energy is. Okay, so for electron, this de Broglie wavelength is one. What do you write? H upon p or h upon root 2 me. For photon, lambda is hc by e, because e is hc by lambda. So how can we relate them? Because energy is same. Because energy is same, what I can directly make it out here, this lambda e is inverse to 1 by root e, or what I can say, e is 1 upon lambda e square, and here e is 1 upon lambda p. So I can directly say lambda e square would be proportional to lambda p. So that would be the option. So as per this comes out as option number 1 from here. Next, a plano-convex lens fits exactly into a plano-concave lens. The plane surfaces are parallel. Lenses are of two materials, mu1 and mu2. That means this plano-convex is mu1, plano-concave is mu2. R be the radii of curvature of the curved surface of the lenses, then the focal length of the combination is going to be. So it would be something like this. This is the plano-concave one, I can say, and this fits into that plano-convex one like this. So this is the plano-convex one. So this is having mu1, this is having mu2. So individually I can calculate first of their focal length. Let's say 1 upon f1 would be what we write, mu1 minus 1 with respect to air I will take. That would be 1 by r minus 1 by infinity. So that was mu1 minus 1 by r. Similarly, 1 by f2 would be mu2 minus 1. It would be what we will have, 1 upon r1, that is 1 upon infinity, minus will become 1 upon r. So it would be, I can write 1 minus mu2 by r. So the equivalent would be 1 upon f1 plus 1 upon f2, because they are placed in contact. You have the LCM r. This is mu1 minus 1 plus 1 minus mu2. So what you are left with, this focal length would be r upon what we have now. This 1 and 1 goes. This would be mu1 and it would be mu1 minus mu2. That is what we are getting, r upon mu1 minus mu2. So this is the option 3 will go for. Next, for a normal eye, the cornea of eye provides a converging power of 40D and the least converging power of the eye lens behind the cornea is 20D. Okay, using this information, the distance between retina and the cornea eye lens can be estimated to be. Okay, so what we have, these two are just touching each other. You can say the total power would be 40 plus 20, that is going to be 60D. Now as per the logic, because we are telling it would be the providing this and the least converging power of the eye lens, so we will talk of an object which is at the infinity. So that image should be at retina. So what I can write, 1 upon that distance d, that is the distance of retina, minus 1 upon, initially it was at infinity, would be equal to 1 upon f, and that 1 upon f you know is 60D. So this 1 upon f is 60, you can directly estimate. So 60, you can say 1 by f is 60, or you better write f is equal to you can say 100 by p. So if I write in that, it would be 100 by 60. That would be the better way to write. So 1 by d minus 1 by infinity, so d comes out as 100 by 60 centimeters. So it would be 1.67 centimeters. So go for option 3. Again, this was a very nicely designed question, not the easy one to get. Next, in a YDSE, the slits are 2 mm apart, illuminated by a photon of 2 wavelength, lambda 1, lambda 2. At what minimum distance from the common central bright fringe on the screen, 2 meters from the slit, will a bright fringe from one interference pattern coincide with a bright fringe? So both maximas combine. So let's say for the maxima of lambda 1, we should have condition of n1 lambda 1 d by d, and it should be equal to n2 lambda 2 d by d. That is what you should have. Okay, so what we have, the common thing will be n1 by n2 would be lambda 2 by lambda 1, that is 10,000 upon 12,000. So 10 by 12 means 5 by 6. So it's fifth and it's sixth. That is what we can say. So what you have to know, what minimum distance from the common center. So let's say fifth of this. So 5 into lambda 1, which is 12 into 10 to the power minus 7, I can make out in standard units. D is 2 and this is 2 into 10 raised to the power minus 3. This 2 and 2 goes. So what you are left with, 12 5 is 60. into 10 to the power minus 4, or you can say 6 mm is going to be the answer. So the least distance from central maxima where both maximas of the wavelengths coincide would be 6 mm. So again, it was a good question, not an easy one for all. Next, a parallel beam of fast moving electron is incident normally on a narrow slit. A fluorescent screen is placed at a large distance. If the speed of the electron is increased, which of the following statement is correct? Diffraction pattern is not observed. Angular width will increase, angular width will decrease, angular width will remain unaffected. So what we say, that angular width of the central maxima, what you write is equal to, what you say is 2 lambda by A. And what is lambda? Lambda for electron working like a light, so lambda would be, you can say, h upon mv. So if the speed is increased, if v is increased, lambda is decreased, so angular width is going to decrease. So we'll say the option third one is the most appropriate one, angular width will decrease. Next, in an n-type semiconductor, which of the following is true? Electrons are majority carrier, yes, and the dopant will be pentavalent, not trivalent. So minority, non-majority and pentavalent, where we are not with electron. So holes will be minority and the dopant still is going to be pentavalent for this. So the option that I'll be looking for available from this would be third. Holes are minority and pentavalent atoms are dopants. Now this 44th one. Now this was the question which get me into a fix, because I even also forgotten what was transconductance, though I am an electronics and communication engineer by my qualification. But after so many years, I was also stung by this, and I have taught this concept to the students at that time. So this question, I suppose most of my students wouldn't have attempted, or would have attempted. I doubt how many could have done it correct. So let me do this. Now I know I teach every year now to our students what is this transconductance, only because this question has come. Otherwise I don't think it is needed. It was a wrong way to give in the question like this to the students. In a C amplifier having a voltage gain G, the transistor has a transconductance 0.03 mho, current gain 25. If it is replaced by another one with a transconductance this and current gain this, the voltage gain will be. Now first of all, what is this transconductance? So we denote it as GM, that is written as change in output current, that is delta IC, upon change in input voltage. You just remember, conductance is current upon voltage. Trans means one is input and one is output. So what we take, change in output current divided by change in input voltage. So now this delta IC, you can delta VB, you can simply write it as that delta IB into RB type term. You can directly relate it with that. So what we have, this voltage gain, what we write as beta RC by RB. And what is this beta? Beta you write it as delta IC upon delta IB, that RC by RB, that you can write. So this whole term is G. So what we can say, if RC remains same, AV is proportional to G. So voltage gain is proportional to G. So now G, instead of 0.03, it has become 0.02. So instead of 0.03, it has become 0.02. That means it has become 2/3. So voltage gain will also become 2/3. So the option is first one. But I sincerely feel there will be very few students who would have done right at that time. Now the last one. The output of the logic circuit shown in figure will be. What is the output X of the logic circuit shown in figure will be? Okay. So what it is, I can make it out. This is what you call as NAND gate. And again, this is a NAND gate. Both input same, so it basically works as NOT. So NOT of NAND, that is going to be AND gate. Directly you can go from logic, it is A dot B. That is a straight away method you can employ here. Otherwise, you have that method which is evergreen. Start with 0 0, because it is a NAND, it will give 1. So 1 and 1, AND will give 1, so NAND will give 0. Again 0 and 1, again it would be 1 and this would be 0. Again 1 and 0, again the AND will give 0, so NAND will give 1. So again it would be 0 and 1 and 1. If you do this 1 and 1, it will give 0 NAND, and 0 and 0, AND will give 0, so NAND will give 1. So this is the truth table for AND gate that you get. So this was the NEET 2013 paper for you. Do send in your feedback so that I can make up my mind how to proceed for next test. Okay, thank you very much.